The Child, the Eagle, and the Raven. A short story written and narrated by YonathanJ. Part 1. I stepped on the porch and the full weight of the day fell on me. It was one of those fresh, striking mornings where the rising sun lights up the whole world and the birds seemed to be racing from branch to branch. The wind felt as a gentle hand rushing across the land, rustling the leaves in a sort of symphony. I stretched and noticed I was smiling widely. At long last I had a day completely for myself, away from family and friends. I intended to make the most of it. I've been looking forward to this day for weeks now, and luckily nature obliged, gifting me most magnificent weather. Our house was sitting next to a cornfield, connected to the road by a humble dirt trail crossing the property. The house itself was antique, as father called it. I thought old would be a better description, but I kept that to myself. Scattered around our lawn were decrepit things that lost their initial purpose through time. One could almost guess what these objects were. Perhaps over there the collapsed chicken coop, elsewhere the shadow of a rusty tractor overgrown by weed, and other such forgotten things sure to fascinate a child's budding mind. When I was younger, I used to play around, exploring these enigmatic ruins of the past, spending hours inspecting and daydreaming about their purpose. The chicken coop surely was once the home of ingenious dwarven farmers, and the tractor their mechanical god. I would make of myself cartographer and keep track of these fabulations in my sketchbook. How simple life was back then, playing for the sake of playing, my imagination as real as the sky. Today I strangely felt the same as I did all those years ago. I wanted to play outside by myself and explore, forgetting all the worries of my life, if only for a day. And so I jumped off the flight of stairs as I did when I was younger. I landed both feet on the dirt trail, the sound the same as it used to be. At that moment I felt it, the playfulness, the innate curiosity of my childhood. I had planned to go for a walk in town, following the dirt trail to the road and then maybe spend some time at the park, crossing the bridge like I usually did. But today that thought seemed most boring, most ennuyeux. Both hands on my hips I stood there, in the middle of the trail, wondering what to do. I yearned for the unknown, the extraordinary, away from roads and signs and people. What to do? I turned around, both hands in my pocket, my mind racing. At that moment I froze. Perched there on a rock a few meters away from me stood a massive eagle, its eyes piercing me with its wings spread out in the sunlight. I had never seen an eagle up close, and that animal was a true beast, at least compared to the birds I usually see. It was standing between myself and the house. I felt the urge to go back home and forget all about this nonsense, yet the eagle didn't seem willing to let me pass. I pictured it as the guardian of a temple, and myself a foolish intruder. The eagle seemed as amused to see me as I was surprised of it. I was about to turn around once more when the eagle screeched and flapped its wings, taking flight. The bird of prey gained altitude until it was but a speck in the sky. I stood there watching as the eagle flew in circles high above me, before taking a sharp turn, hovering slowly, almost inviting me. It screeched once more, and my legs began moving on their own. I had the sudden urge to follow it, and so I did. After all, I didn't have anything better to do. Besides, the eagle was flying toward a mountain to the east, that was a few miles away from home, beyond the cornfield. I didn't know the mountain's name, or if there were any trails there for hiking, but it didn't matter. I happily followed my new friend, my mind as blank as the sky above me. The cornfield went on for a while. I could see the edge of the forest on the horizon under the mountain. Getting around was easy since the corn didn't have the time to grow much yet, and it wasn't too hot despite the sun, for the wind was sure to refresh me every so often. I loved the sound of the ground under my footsteps and my breathing. That was all I could hear, along with the wind blowing and the occasional screeching of the eagle, reminding me of our new friendship. Seconds became minutes, and I made it to the edge of the field, bordering the wall of trees. The forest was dense, almost impenetrable. Between the field and the forest was a pretty deep channel, making it quite hard to cross to the other side safely. I didn't want to get wet, and the bottom seemed to be filled with water. I heard frogs croaking. Perhaps I could make a run for it and jump all the way to the other side. I picture myself falling down there in the muddy water, joining my new friends the frogs, as the eagle would watch from above, laughing. I took 7 steps back and saw myself run like a madman, leaping as if my life depended on it. In the air I looked down and saw hundreds of frogs looking up to me in incredulity. I landed on the other side, a bit too close to the edge to my liking. I laughed and laughed, the little frog's eyes being a bit too silly for me. Now the forest was much chillier than the field, blocking the sun. Fortunately, I could still hear the eagle high above everything, his screeching covering my soft breathing. What surprised me most about the forest was the unevenness of the ground, making it quite difficult to traverse. I thought a few times about turning back, about how silly this all was. I continued. Perhaps I wished to see where exactly this eagle was taking me. Some trees were much bigger and taller than others, and there were bushes and fallen branches everywhere. There were birds as well, in much higher number and variety than in town. Every step I took was accompanied by a new melody, and often I could spot one of the musicians, a bluebird on a branch over there and a red one over there. Yet every time the eagle screeched from high up there, the forest fell into complete silence, only to begin again a few seconds later. Or was it minutes? I seemed to have lost the sense of time and simply embraced nature for what it was. The woods grew thinner, and after a few fallen trees I came upon a clearing. I stepped into the sunlight and giggled in its warmth. By now the sun had risen quite a bit and was much hotter. So quite agreeable, especially here between the mountain and the forest. The grass was lush and unkempt, waving in the wind. Bumblebees and crickets and a few dragonflies greeted me, the unlikely traveler, before going back to their business. I was looking for the eagle, yet I couldn't find him or hear him. Did I lose him, or perhaps it lost me? What I was hearing, though, was the very soft flowing of water, and that reminded me of just how thirsty I was. I ran along down the clearing, and sure enough, there was a river downhill, not really wide, but big enough to be called so. Its waters were shining in the sun, tickling my eyes from a distance. Near the water was the eagle at last, its wings once more spread out, maybe so that I could spot him more easily. I was laughing as I approached, and the eagle didn't seem to pay me any mind. The shores were full of pebbles, and the water was as deep as my ankles. So fresh. I formed a cup with both my hands and drank my fill. It was the best water I ever drank, and probably ever will. I gasped and looked around. Beside the eagle, I was completely alone. Not a soul in perhaps miles around. I lay there on the shores, my feet in the river's flow, and looked up at the sky. What a perfect day this has been so far. I wondered, would it be too much to ask for each day to be as simple and carefree as this one? No more work, chores, boring social events, and family masquerades. Simply me, alone and free, exploring as I used to do when younger, and foolishly believed I could do so forever, until inevitably time passed and reality kicked in, breaking down the door, making itself a home, as I watched powerless, my shattered dreams scattered around me, replaced with a big orange sign marked in capital letters, Duty. And the bliss of my daydreaming was thrown out the window as a pesky bug one can't bring himself to squish. The machinations of society swallowed me, this clueless child, and made me like all others, mere replaceable pieces of a wicked whole, and to my surprise, my toes were being tickled in the river stream, interrupting my downward spiral of negative thoughts. I got up, somewhat dizzy from laying down for who knows how long. I looked carefully at the riverbed, and surely enough, tiny, minuscule fishes were munching on my toes. What adorable creatures! What caught my eyes was a sort of flickering glare underneath the many fishes. I plunged my hand, chasing away my little friends, and grabbed the glowing object that was incredibly heavy for its size. It was slightly bigger than my closed fist, and as it broke the water's surface, I fell back down on the ground, holding what I realized was a massive golden nugget. I couldn't believe it. I kept looking at it, and the more I looked at it, the more I liked it. I was inspecting it from all sides, hypnotized by the sunlight's reflection. From one angle I could almost distinguish the abstract shape of a skull. A solid gold, incredibly valuable skull. Although it seemed to be nothing more than mere fabulations of our mind, and the gold nugget was simply a mundane shape, I couldn't help but marvel at its beauty. Sitting there I wondered just how much was its worth. Just how valuable was this lump of gold I held in my hand? My mind was racing. I figured that much gold would probably be worth at least a few tens of thousands of dollars, no less. That was life-changing. I saw myself hunched over, inspecting my treasure, as the eagle was indifferently gazing at me, unimpressed with my newfound obsession. I was holding the gold nugget between my two hands, turning it over and over, my thoughts spiraling as though possessed by the sheer exaltation of possibilities my treasure unlocked. I dreamt of selling it to the highest bidder and using the money to buy land and build my own cozy home by myself, leaving in the dust my family and friends that would only grow jealous of my luck. At that moment, the eagle screeched in what I interpreted as panic. I heard the ominous flapping of wings in the air. I looked up, and surely there, hovering above the river, a raven, its terrible black wings even larger than the eagle's. Its eyes were black holes, and as the raven landed at last on the ground, clouds rolled in, blocking the sun. In a few seconds I was now shivering in the cold, paralyzed by fear under the greedy eye of the black bird.